Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to read one of my essays from my Substack. Let me know what you think about this essay and this format. And if you're interested, please consider subscribing to my Substack, which will be linked in the description below. The title of this essay is, What Do You Do When No One's Looking? Over the past few weeks, I've been focused on the relationship between actions and words. One can argue that speaking is a behavior, but I think it's useful to note the differences between the words that come from one's mouth and their physical actions in the world. A person can say one thing and do another, which most people view as hypocrisy and to be exemplary of a disjointed character. Although words are in the abstract, they have tremendous power to persuade others and possess them. Most people, most of the time, think in words, and the ideas that we generate and share can tilt the culture towards a better or worse future. Speech is important, but it is nested in a behavioral context. The actions back up the words, or at least that's how we treat other people. We feel that people whose words do not have the buttressing of actions lack integrity. I take this to indicate that words are a useful tool, but the primary landscape of meaning lies in behavior. Given this line of thinking, I see a great danger in the continued rise of social media, as this technology seems to be facilitating a degeneration of integrity in people. Our words, or online posts, carry more weight than they did in the past because of the unprecedented scale and reach they have. It's quite easy to see a post of someone else's where they claim to be against war, poverty, and injustice. The crowd applauds their virtue, and this attention reinforces the decision of the original poster. The behavior of the crowd and decision of the poster are predicated on basic aspects of human nature. Most people are not psychopaths or sadists, and hence are against all forms of unnecessary suffering. People also appreciate a strong stance, especially one that signals in-group similarities. Finally, there's nothing more valuable than attention, so many forms of social focus can lead to confirmation bias and the continuation of that which initiated the attention. These human proclivities can be co-opted or even weaponized. I recall the phrase "silence is violence" making its way into the cultural milieu, particularly in the conversation of race during the 2020 protests after the death of George Floyd. It was one thing for there to be an overappreciation for those who simply claim to be against tragedy and malevolence, but it was something else to see the crowd create pressure for those who never made their stance clear, as if not participating in the social media frenzies meant you thought that evil and suffering was desired. I think what bothers me the most about this way of navigating contention with unjust systems, or even true evil, is that it gives an easy out for those who want to look good but do not want to put in the work. Let's agree that there's some level of injustice everywhere, from the individual level up to the collective nation. Most people who pay attention to this sort of thing clearly see that the system isn't perfect, but the variation in response falls along a wide spectrum. Some people post about it on social media. Others go to a single protest with no follow-on actions. Then there's a small minority of people who dedicate their lives to understanding, diagnosing, and finding a solution for the problem. The people in this latter category have my utmost admiration, and it makes me view those in the former groups as inauthentic and having a self-serving aim. I suppose my mindset could be summarized as, if you really thought this was an important issue, you'd act as such and not stand conveniently comfortable behind your words. A quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. comes to mind. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. What I want to try and do in this paper is to remind people that the words and outward expressions of individuals are useful only insofar as they are predicated on actions, specifically actions that the public generally doesn't see. Sigmund Freud, a famous Austrian neurologist and psychoanalyst, believed that the dream images that we experienced were disparate, loosely associated manifestations of a deeper, central motivation or meaning. He called the dream material that we witness the manifest content, while the true message of the manifest content was called the latent content. One can imagine a central hub of a wheel with spokes sticking outward from it, the latent content being the hub and the manifest content being the spokes. At first glance, this is why dreams often appear not to make sense. We experience them in a consecutive sequence of events which implies a coherent logic or narrative, and yet the strangeness of the dreams can make it difficult to derive a unified rationality. I believe that Freud's notion of manifest and latent content can be overlaid on waking life as well as our dreams. People have a persona, which is the socially acceptable part of our personality, which serves the purpose of maintaining a peaceful, functional, social environment. The persona is a mask that represents the general contents of the collective psyche, just like the manifest content bears some relationship to the latent content. What we typically deal with when we encounter most people, aside from our most intimate relationships, is this persona. The more that an individual identifies with their persona or mistakes the manifest to be the latent, the less genuine and true they are. They risk losing themselves and engaging in a deception that harms both themselves and those around them. A properly balanced personality is not so individualistic that it becomes isolated, but also not so attached to the collective that their idiosyncrasies are smothered. People exist in layers. We exist as a radial category with central aspects and a periphery that's less representative, but nonetheless necessary. We recognize this unconsciously, and yet it's one of the first principles to leave our mind when we engage in the world. Today, the world of social media, filled with personas and manifest content, is becoming the true reality. We can become so focused on the publicly facing lag measures that we forget that we are supposed to integrate the good habits and behaviors that go into the results we post. This collective persona is facilitating the replacement of hard work and discipline for moral grandstanding, and we need to wake up and attend to this phenomenon if we are to maintain our grip on reality. It's easy to create a mask of words and images. It's harder to actually do something. While there's great utility in the linguistic landscape, we must remember that our pre-linguistic ancestors were every bit as wise as we are. They thrived and navigated reality using behavior and emotional expressions. The advent of the spoken and written word allowed for the generation of powerful cognitive faculties, but every benefit comes with a concomitant trade-off. It's easier to lie and manipulate using words, partly because the cost in the short term is not as high or self-evident. To the extent that we think in words, our speech affects how we see ourselves, the world, and others. A large function of thinking is to plan out potential behavioral patterns and judge them on their capacity to bring about a desired future. Speech bears tremendous weight on our thoughts, actions, and ability to predict the environment, but is typically conceptualized in the abstract. This abstraction makes it easier for individuals to lie and deceive. Speech contains little information compared to the imagistic, emotional, and procedural landscapes, but this allows it to be precise, narrow, and matter of fact. Particularly, if we strip speech of its more musical elements, one can set up an entire system of rational propositions that ultimately are false or can lead to undesirable outcomes. There's a neurological basis for the relationship between speech and manipulation. Human brains are bifurcated, where the right and left hemispheres generally perform the same functions but in different ways. The right hemisphere is more contextual, relational, holistic, unconscious, and fosters negative emotion. The left hemisphere is more reductionist, narrow, confabulatory, and myopic. While both hemispheres are involved in language, speech is typically localized to the left. Speech helps us grasp, manipulate, categorize, and routinize the world. Just as there's a danger in elevating the status of the left hemisphere over that of the right, there's a danger in elevating speech to be the primary facilitator of the meaning we experience. As a Marine Corps officer, I would have been laughed out of my rank if I told my Marines that they were supposed to be in shape, but I was fat and lazy. My belief is that it's better to lead implicitly by example. I've spent years developing my level of fitness, and no matter which unit I was a part of, I was at least in the top 5% in terms of physical fitness by typical measurements of pull-ups and a 3-mile run. I was able to stand out in this manner because of the early mornings spent struggling through the heat and cold to accomplish my running plan. There was a time when I could only do 4 or 5 pull-ups consistently, but I took the time and put in the effort to build up to around 30. Most people only see the few minutes of performance during the fitness tests, and only those who've gone through the similar experiences know the work that went on behind the scenes. It's good to be known as someone who enjoys doing difficult things, partially because life itself is hard. Anyone can say they're fit, anyone can make claims of mental toughness and discipline. However, these postulations only have power if they are clearly backed up. I'm not saying that you should only work and put in effort for other people, but I am saying that your focus should be on your habits, on those leading measures that will bring forth the results that you can share. People's habits are the best indicators of their values, not their words. Your habits are a pattern that you manifest. They are an aspect of your way of being. This pattern, that which is similar across contexts, time, and space, is akin to your reputation. We know this about ourselves because we are always with ourselves, but we can suppress this notion when judging others. Again, the public personas are necessary. The manifest content, those parts of other people's lives which they choose to present to us, tell us a story and provide an insightful gist into who they are and what they have going on. The persona and the manifest content must be grounded in genuine authenticity, or else deception and falsity can prevail. Jesus taught, "When you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by men. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen." We have to judge other people because we have to act in our social environment. To refrain from judging is to ignore everyone equally all the time. When we judge, we should keep in mind that what we see from others has a probability of being a shallow facade. What makes us unique are the patterns of perceptions and actions that we embody across multiple contexts, and to lose sight of that fact in ourselves and in others is to trivialize, reduce, and constrain our humanity.